Good morning. I love seeing all you early birds coming, and if you keep coming like this, that curtain is going to be up on the side before we know it. A couple of things. College students are coming back this week. Can we just welcome them back to the house? Love having you around. And then last week, if you didn't know, we actually did a Hope Day, and a Hope Day is when people show up and go to homes and businesses and do something to make that significantly better. And so there were 13 sites last week, and over 200 volunteers put in a full day of labor and did some phenomenal. I've been hearing the stories of that all week. Can we just thank them for serving that way? Yeah, that makes all the difference in the world. We're in a series called Rewriting Your Story, and if you're not happy with how your story is going, we can hope that it just eventually changes over time, but given history, that's not likely. And we can assume that the reason our story is the way it is because other people have played a part in being the author of that story, and if we just got the pen away from them, my life would be better. We can also assume that if I had the pen, my life would be better, but the tendency that we have is to just continue to repeat over and over again the situations that we find ourselves in. So how can we actually have our story rewritten? And it won't be because somebody else comes into our life and writes it for us, or we take the pen and write it for ourselves. It's when we give the pen to God and see what He can do with our lives. And so today this whole series is in the book of Philippians, and Philippi is the city that this is based in. That's who Paul is writing to. And what you have to know about the people there is that status was the most important thing. It wasn't just important, it was actually sacred to them. How you ranked in society, that was great. And humility didn't just feel odd, it felt wrong. Their entire lives, everything they knew about themselves was built on how they were perceived in the city around them. And Philippi was a place where there was a lot of patriotic veterans and nationalists. It was like Rome away from Rome, even though it was separated by hundreds of miles. They were thrilled and delighted about their Roman values and about their Roman citizenship. And so status is the most important thing. So the question is, what does a man who is in prison again, the Apostle Paul, writing a letter, have to say to people whose whole lives revolve around status? And he has a lot to say. And so we're going to take a little bit of a look at that today. Just to give you a heads up, we are aware, from Acts chapter 16, we are aware of some converts to this church from Philippi. And it really is an odd admixture. Not quite as odd as our admixture. One person was, her name was Lydia, and she was a titan. She was she made money selling purple cloth, which was a higher end fabric option, and it was desirable. Philippi's on the trade route, so she was well positioned. She had lots of money, lots of connections. She was spiritually sensitive. She was intrigued and interested in spiritual things, but no real commitment. She ran into the Apostle Paul, and she listened to his preaching, and the Bible says that the Lord opened her heart. And she became a significant factor. In fact, as you know, wealthy people tend to live in pretty nice homes. She invited Paul and his companions into their home. That could be their base of operation, and they began to preach the gospel out of there. So Lydia is a wealthy titan. And then there was a servant girl, a slave girl, who had been trafficked, and she was demon-possessed, and she had the ability to forecast or predict fortunes. And so she would, and by this, the people who owned her made a whole lot of money. And so she was following the Apostle Paul around when he was preaching, and she just kept yelling out a lot, really loud, just be sure to listen to what this man has to say. And after a few days of that, Paul got tired. How many here would get tired of someone yelling after a few days? After a few minutes? Yeah. And so he just cast the demonic spirit out of her. And when that spirit left, she not only found peace and she found Christ, She also lost her capacity to predict fortunes, and that resulted in a significant shift in the paradigm, both economically and spiritually, in Philippi. And very wealthy people and very powerful people had their income significantly affected by that single action. And their response was to go to the government authorities and have Paul and Silas arrested and put in jail. That's where we meet the third convert, and he's the Roman jailer. And as a Roman jailer, he would have been a retired military officer. This is kind of his pension. This is where he raises his family now. And we know some things about him. We know he's kind of a stoic guy. He'd seen a lot. We know he's armed. That's what military people do. We also know that he's one breath away from taking his own life. And as a result of a miraculous intervention by God, there's an earthquake that just kind of knocks the doors off the prison and the chains off the people that are there. And when the jailer sees that the prisoners have escaped, he's going to take his own life. And Paul intervenes. And he tells him, you don't need to do that. First of all the prisoners are here. We haven't gone anywhere. And he preaches the gospel. And that night, the jailer and his entire household became followers of Jesus. Isn't that amazing? And here's what's really interesting about that. He went from being this stoic, kind of cold, hard-hearted individual. This is what Acts 16 tells us. First of all, he washed their wounds. He was responsible for their wounds. Now he's washing their wounds. He served them food. And he was known for his great joy. Isn't that phenomenal? Such a difference that was made. And here's what's interesting. Of those three people, none of their paths would have ever crossed just living out their daily lives. Wealthy people and patriotic retired military officers and demon-possessed servant girls, they don't traffic in the same paths. They don't show up in the same rooms. They don't sit at the same table. But because of Jesus, they all are. They're sitting at the same table. It's absolutely amazing. God was doing an incredible work in their lives. And you can read all about it in Acts chapter 16 if you want to go back and look at that. So what I want us to know this morning, first of all, is this. Humility is the superpower nobody wants. Humility is the superpower nobody wants. I mean, if you were going to have a superpower, what would your superpower be? Some of us would want to fly, but if you're afraid of heights, that could be a problem. Can you imagine? Some of us want to be strong. Some of us want to be invincible. Some of us want to be invisible. Like there's all kinds of powers that people would want. I've never heard anybody say, instead of this is a job for Superman, this is a job for humble man. Kind of like that. And yet, it is what changes history and changes our lives. This is how Paul introduces the conversation to these Philippians who are all about status. Is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ? Any comfort from his love? Any fellowship together in the Spirit? Are your hearts tender and compassionate? Make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and purpose. Don't be, what's the next word? Selfish. Don't be selfish. Don't try to, what's the next word? Impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. Their culture had taught them. It was, you learned this lesson at the knee of your parents, at every educational opportunity you had. It was baked into the culture. It was a super value. There was no reason for you to ever doubt its veracity, and that is this. You needed to leverage every situation for your advantage. The only reason you would ever help anyone or do anything was if it would also bettered you in some way. The prominent question in Philippi, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? And Paul writes something to them that's very different. The truth is that not just a few of us know what it's like to wrestle with long-term anxiety. Some of us have had to deal with bitterness because of things that have been done to us by others. Some of us have had to deal with anger and frustration. It's become kind of a razor's edge. I wanted to find out how much complaining there was on the internet. And the numbers are still totaling up. It's hard to track. Angry people and disappointed because so much of life doesn't work out the way that we wished that it would. What we find ourselves is even if we change our locations, we wind up living out the same story. What Paul is saying is you can't really rewrite your story hanging on to the things that make it impossible to change. See, this is how we think. If I got the job I wanted, if I got the house I wanted, if I got the mate that I wanted, if I had the children that I wanted, if I had the income that I wanted, if I had those things, then my life would be. Then my life would be. And then there's something there. And there are people who spend their whole lives pursuing those things, and their life isn't what they wanted it to be. Or they got what they wanted, and it's not what they thought it would be. And so he calls them to a different option. It's the superpower that nobody wants, but it's the thing that actually brings change. And that is humility. You must have the same attitude, he says. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. And when he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on the cross. Therefore, God elevated him to the place of highest honor and gave him the name above all other names, that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven, on earth, and under the earth, and every tongue declare that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Humility doesn't make headlines. It doesn't trend well on social media, but it is the thing that changes our story. I think a lot of people feel stuck or sliding in a direction they would not prefer to go. And our culture, like all cultures before us, keep telling us the way you change your story is you wrestle that pen out of someone else's hand and you write it for yourself. And Paul says, I've seen that done. And all you do is write the same story in a different place with different people. He has discovered what it is that actually makes a difference, and it's humility. Jesus had all the divine privileges, all the perks, and yet he did not feel entitled, nor did he act that way. It was not the source of his identity, the privileges and the perks that he had. No. His identity was in his relationship with his Father. He demonstrates security through sacrifice and through serving, which is completely countercultural. And Jesus became the most influential person on the planet in the entire history of people. And there's not a close second. People have been captivated by this man for over 2,000 years. And right now, over 1 out of 4 people on our planet are followers of him, 2,000 years after he walked on this earth. You cannot deny his influence. But what we fail to see is, how did he have such influence? And the answer is because he humbled himself. He became the most influential person by humbling himself. So you cannot rewrite your story if you're still clinging to the old one. You cannot rewrite your story if you're still clinging to the old one. Look at what the Apostle Paul says now. Dear friends, you always followed my instructions when I was with you, and now that I am away, it is even more important. Work hard to show the results of your salvation. Work hard to show the results of your salvation, obeying God with deep reverence and fear. For God is in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases him. Do everything without, next word, complaining. Wow. And arguing. What would we have left to say if we couldn't complain and argue? Do everything without complaining and arguing so that no one can criticize you. Live clean, innocent lives as children of God, shining like bright lights in the world full of crooked and perverse people. Hold firmly to the word of life. Then on the day of Christ's return, I will be proud that I did not run the race in vain and that my work was not useless. But I will rejoice even if I lose my life, pouring it out like a liquid offering to God, just like your faithful service is an offering to God. And I want all of you to share that joy. Yes, you should rejoice, and I will share your joy. Our tendency is to cling to control. Our tendency is to hold tight to the grudges that we have. Some of us are not just waiting for someone to say that they're sorry. We've actually built an identity on those interactions. And some of us just always have to be right. Let's just check. You ready for a humble admission? How many like being right? The ones who didn't raise your hand, that wasn't humility. That's not what that was. We cling to all of these things and then we wonder, why am I exhausted? Why is life not working the way that I want? And the truth is that if we cling to our bitterness and we cling to our ambition and we cling to our need to be admired and our need to be right all of the time, then nothing ever changes for the good. You can't expect a new story clinging to the old one. Paul makes it clear. It is fascinating to see how he approaches this. He doesn't tell us to work for our salvation, so work really hard so that you get approved by God. Do all the right things in all the right ways, in all the right places, to all the right people, because that's just another attempt to gain status in society. I want to make sure everybody knows what it is I'm doing. I want to make sure I benefit from this in some way. It's one of the most frustrating things to Christians when things don't go the way that they want. They were pretty sure that because they gave some money in the offering and they showed up in rooms like this on days like this and they helped some other people, that this stuff should not be happening to me. And they'll even say, so then what's the benefit of following Jesus if I'm going to wind up living the same life? What that shows is that they don't understand Christianity at all. It's not like Jesus is saying, yeah, all those other things, those are unworthy pursuits to gain status, but here's the real way to gain status. No, Paul is just cutting this idea off at the knees. A man in prison is writing to people who are power drunk, and what he's telling them is the way you experience a different story, a divine story in your life, is to take the path of humility. That's the thing that makes all the difference. And we don't work for our salvation. He does tell us to work hard to show the results of our salvation. That's a very different thing. I'm not trying to earn anything with God, but look what he's done. And I want to live consistent with what he's done for me. That's a very different way to live. His desire is to please God. And by the way, don't raise your hand. Just give me your best poker face right now. Some of you have had it all morning long, so God bless you. So, it kind of goes like this. When you look at your life and you look at your future? How do you think about it? And if you've ever had a desire to please God, think about this. If you've ever had a desire to please God, where do you think that desire came from? Well, Pastor, I just decided. No, you didn't. Where did the desire come from? To please a God you cannot see, who operates on a system that is actually completely different than everything our world teaches us. If you've ever had a desire to please God, even that is a gift from God. And not only does he give us the desire, he gives us the power, the ability, the opportunity to do things that please him. So what does that look like? You ready? I know this is going to be hard. Do everything without complaining and arguing. Really? I mean, how will people know that this is not right unless somebody complains and argues? Do you know what? If you want, I shouldn't tell you this, because this could cause just unbelievable backsliding. But it's true, and that is, if you want to develop the quickest, easiest, lowest bar relationship with other people, all you have to do is complain about stuff, and they will, if all the people who agree with you about that stuff, you will have a connection. Isn't that great? Oh, yeah. I thought the music was too loud, too. There you go. Yep. I thought the message was too long, too. There you go. And you found your next best friend. See, we can do this. And Paul says, nothing in your life will actually change for the better by your arguing and your complaining. Okay, what else you got, Paul? He also says, live clean, innocent lives. Live clean, innocent lives. Think about this. In fact, I'm going to ask you the opposite of something, and then you can tell your neighbor what you think the opposite is, all right? What is the opposite of innocent? Go and tell your neighbor, what do you think the opposite of innocent is? What's the opposite of innocent? What did you think it was? Guilty. It's not. It's not. The opposite of innocent is not guilty. The opposite of innocent means integrated, that your life is consistent. And the opposite of innocent is when there's underlying motives and underlying manipulations and underlying desires. And you have this conflict within yourself, and so you operate out of this conflict. Well, I want to be seen like this, but what I want is this. And if nobody's watching, then maybe I'll do this. And the Apostle Paul says, I want you to live clean and innocent lives, and I want you to hold firmly the words of Jesus. Hold firmly the words of Jesus, because we are constantly assaulted with the words of other people who have the status in our society that makes us want to be like them. I mean, if someone's got millions of views or millions of followers on social media, if someone has all the best houses and all the best cars and all the best clothes, if someone has the best looks, we just look at people, oh, that's what I want. How do I get it? And they will tell you, status seeking. Just always make sure every situation helps you climb that ladder one more rung. And Jesus comes along and says, it's not how it works. I'm going to ask the worship team to come up. Instead, Jesus makes himself small. Divine God makes himself small. Small enough to enter a room. Small enough to be betrayed. Small enough to hang on a cross. And what Paul wants us to know is, as bad as that looked, this isn't Jesus giving up. It's Jesus saying, this is the way the world changes. This is how your life changes. I know it sounds odd and it sounds fantastical and it sounds maybe crazy to you. And maybe you're one of those people that you have pursued status and it's working for you right now. Okay. But lots of people have discovered that pursuit is not working for them, and they keep coming up with the same question: what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Why isn't this working? Why isn't my life becoming what I want it to become? And it's because we have accepted a set of ground rules that guarantee the outcome of our story is always the same. But Paul says, take on the attitude of Jesus. I'm not entitled. I'm not going to hold on to anything. But where there's an opportunity to serve, I will do that. I will consider others better than myself. I will consider the interest of others and not just my own. And the result is, this is fascinating, is a kind of unity that takes place, which means unity is not finding my tribe where everybody is just like me. That's not unity. That's uniformity. That's a different thing. But I can be with people who are different than me. And empathy is I can have concern and compassion on people who aren't doing as well as me. That's what makes the difference. That's what makes the difference. And if our whole life is spent on just trying to get ahead of someone else, you can't help anyone else. Let's bow our heads this morning. Father, would you help us today? We don't want to live the same story over and over again. We don't want to be caught in a loop that we can't get out of. And we keep clinging and striving and trying. Would you help us today to surrender some things that, quite honestly, even if it doesn't help us, sometimes it feels good. Will you help us today to give up complaining and arguing? Will you help us today to live not just trying to avoid guilt, but to live an integrated life? I'm the same person in every room I walk into. Will you help us live out your grace today? Because that's the story we want. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's all stand together this morning.